in, everybody, to episode 28 of Girl, How'd You Get That Gig? I know we're climbing, Celeste. We're
We
getting
are.
there.
Yay.
I'm Amy G, as always, joined by my partner Celeste Gehring, and our guest today, someone you've certainly seen or listened to on a multitude of platforms, best known as an Emmy and Peabody award-winning sports journalist. She's a contributor at ESPNW, and recently, this is so exciting, released her own daily podcast, Good Game with Sarah Spain, a daily women's sports show on iHeart podcast. She does it all, and she does it with humor, intellect, and wittiness. Welcome in, Sarah Spain.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yay.
having me.
We don't
Yeah.
have sound effects yet, so we do it
No, I
ourselves.
like it. The
Yes.
circle clap, it's good. You guys were coordinated too, synchronized. New
Mhm.
Olympic event.
New Olympic
Right,
event,
exactly.
coordinated clapping,
Yeah.
podcast clapping.
Oh, we can't wait to talk about all you've done, Sarah. It's so
I
exciting.
know. I know. We're just thrilled that you made the time to do this, first of all. So thank you. And we are absolutely thrilled about the announcement of Women's Audio Network on iHeart in partnership with Deep Blue Sports and Entertainment. So let's start there. What can you tell us about your role in this launch? All the
Yeah.
details about your podcast, Good Game with Sarah Spain.
Yeah. So it's wild. I've been wanting to do a women's specific show for years and pitched it a number of times, even brought sponsors along. And I think a lot of the decision makers are still catching up on the analytics and data around women's sports. They're stuck in these really antiquated old stories they tell themselves about it being a charity or something to support instead of a really, really big economic opportunity.
Right.
And if you look at places like the Sports Innovation Lab, which have released a couple fan projects, they do multiple years of research to show that we're actually years behind in terms of benefiting from the economic opportunities in women's sports, not just in TV rights and things like that, but brand affinity, what the sponsors and brands can benefit from when they start appealing to the fans of women's sports, both men and women. So I've been on this for a while, and it just needed to be the right time and place and right people. For 13 years with ESPN, I was doing TV, writing, podcast, radio, all the jobs. And when that kind of changed and I started focusing on ESPNW over there and looking for other gigs, I met Laura Correnti, who is an investor, and I guess she's more of advisor for Gotham, the NWSL soccer team.
Mhm.
And she said, "We want to get this women's sports audio network. How is it possible that this doesn't exist? Would you want to be involved?" And I was like, "Let me think about it." And then Sue Bird texted me and was like, "I'm involved and I want you to do a show." And I was like, "Well, I'll do anything, Sue
Yeah,
Bird."
for you.
Basically. Um, so only a couple shows have launched so far, but there are more to come. Mine is sort of the tentpole daily show. It's
Mhm.
hard getting back in the daily grind, but it's also really fun, and it's absolutely what women's sports needs. If you look around,
Yeah.
we're doing better at like the feature stories and the documentaries, but that connective tissue every day of like hearing the names and the leagues and getting the stories and becoming familiar with them in the way we are with men's, because we've had that literally everywhere all the time for like a century plus, is really, I think, the next step towards getting
Sure.
people to become fans the way that we are of all the men's teams we've been watching forever.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about all of it. So when you say the daily grind, let
Yeah.
break it down. What does that look like for you, your daily duties?
Yeah. So I'm terrible at math. I even said it wrong on the podcast. I want to say we're like 11 episodes in or so. Um, so for 13 years, I did daily radio. It started out as updates for local Chicago. Then I started doing some weekend shows hosting. Then I had my own nightly national show for 7 years. And I really want to get out of that schedule because I was done at 8 or 9 p.m. And then you can't go to games that you're talking about. You have to start watching the games right after you're done, after you've just spent the entire day following everything that was happening so you could talk about it on your show.
Right.
Um, and so with this, it's better in the sense that there's less inventory in women's sports and we can be more intentional about what we want to talk about. Whereas on the other side, when I was doing like Spain and Fitz or those nightly shows, it really was like there's a million different things you could talk about and you need to know about all of them and talk about all of them for 2 to 3 hours. This is a half hour every day. We want to give you what you need to know and then have a great guest or a great conversation or like one topic that takes up a larger chunk, and then send you off with some fun facts, give you some mythologizing about female athletes that you should already know, but maybe don't because we haven't done it enough in our society, talk about some legends, hype you for some things coming up. So it's a lot more compact. But yeah, I mean, we wake up and my producers, I have two producers, Misha and Alex, they're both awesome. We start looking around at like, what do you need to know today? Who won what? Who got traded? Who said what? What's coming up today that you should watch? And then, trying to, plan around what kind of guests make sense. Or like I said, there's some really fun topics. Like there's a WNBA player, Sylvia Fowles. She had announced her retirement. She was playing in her final All-Star game, and she hadn't dunked in a live game in like 13 years. And she dunked in her final All-Star game. And just the fact that we don't talk about that the way we talk about some of the feats of men's athletes, because we just don't really know the stories, like that kind of stuff we're looking around for. How can we elevate some of those stories, remind people of things that happened before? When Caitlin Clark passes some sort of record, we say, let's tell you about the person who originally had it.
Right.
And like, let's learn about them so that when you're talking about these athletes, you have context and you can say, she's one of the best passers ever, because you actually know what the other great passers in the league have been.
Right.
It makes the conversation so much smarter. It makes the bar debates and water cooler chats more informed.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. And after all of your work with ESPNW and being such an amazing advocate for women's sports, when this started to form, like you talked about, like this has been so needed for such a long time. Were you just, you talked about Sue Bird calling you and all of that. Were you just like, yes, it's my time, like it's our time to bring women forward? Or when you're talking about Sports Innovation Lab and talking about all the research that they've done, isn't it just surprising that it's taken this long? It just like Amy and I talk about this all the time. It just shocks us that women's sports hasn't caught on.
It's like bittersweet a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we had done this years ago, we would have helped it get to where we are now way faster. But it's also funny how many people are having me on to talk about the show and being like, this is amazing timing. Holy cow, you couldn't have picked a better time. And that's true too. Like there aren't the same barriers right now of people being like, there isn't enough content, no one cares. Like every single piece of data tells you we're all wearing the shirts now. Everybody watches women's sports. Shout out to Together. So that makes it easier, that there are so many proof points that it literally is almost impossible to say that nobody wants it and there isn't enough to talk about. And for me also, it does make it easier to do the job that there's more coverage. One of the things that's hard in women's sports is you're trying to piece together one podcast over here that's once a week, this social account that you follow, this newsletter that comes twice a week. You're trying to cobble it all together to create the kind of ecosystem that in men's sports, you have to whittle down 8,000 shows a day to figure out which one you like the most and gives you the information you want, or just turn on SportsCenter and see everything you need. And in women's sports, it's much harder. That's one of the things we're trying to be on this show is like, if you tune in every day, you're going to at least know the biggest things that you need to know. And also for me doing my job, there are more sites now. There are more people covering things on social. So in order to get all the information we need for our show, we don't have to go quite as far down in the digging to find it. But we do want to put it all in one place. And yeah, when they called me, it was like, I've been pitching this for years, but it also feels like the right time for me personally to take my understanding of the space and put it to work. And one of the things I had to decide with this show was, how do I want it to sound? What do I want people to, what information do I want people to have? And as much as I've always loved getting into the weeds on sticky topics and calling people out and talking about how underfunded or under-resourced or undercovered things are, the main thing I actually want is for people to find this fun and to realize that women's sports is fun. And if you follow on all those social accounts, you're cracking jokes. You've got the inside jokes about the athletes and the teams and the players, just like people do on the men's side. So giving people that vibe. So I do want to talk about sometimes when things are unfair or where the isms intersect with women's sports. But more than that, I want a half hour every day of creating a community of people who love sports and can be honest about the other parts of themselves. Make Taylor Swift references, talk about being a woman, or if you're a man who's a fan of women's sports, being an ally for that. Like, I felt like I couldn't bring my whole self to my job for the last 13 years in a lot of ways because the audience didn't want all of that.
They weren't ready for it.
Yeah. Or my bosses didn't want it. Or I could read the audience and say, this is predominantly men. And they want me to make a, Step Brothers joke and talk about drinking beer, not drop Taylor Swift Easter eggs, And so instead of having to try to read that, I get to be entirely myself, which is a huge sports fan and insanely competitive and wants to talk shit and talk about other stuff and that people understand. Like, so it's been super fun.
So as always, Les always sees me do this. So many things happening right now, listening to you. All first and foremost, like, just the timing and the country being ready, like that kind of crosses over into all different aspects of women's lives, whether we're going back to women trying to get the right to vote or we're in current politics today of what we're seeing. Like, my daughter at 16 years old, saw Hillary Clinton run for president. I never ever thought as a little girl that would even be possible. So the changes that we're seeing, the evolution that we're seeing for women across the board is amazing. It's a fantastic time, a scary time, but a fantastic time of progress that we're seeing. And then like the old age argument of, well, women's sports, they're just not as entertaining, they're not as athletic. I mean, that was what I heard all the time, and we had no one at our games for anything, and we were working our asses off.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at the Olympics right now and the star power watching women's sports, right? Just like Jessica Chastain, I was like, well, that's random, but
Yeah.
that's fantastic. And
Yeah.
Sarah Jessica Parker, Tom Cruise,
Yeah.
Spike Lee, they're all at women's events. So there's something to be said about people being ready
Yeah.
to receive the
Yeah.
talent that they're seeing and be accepting of the talent that
I
they're
agree.
seeing.
I think that brings me like two important things. One is, yes, absolutely, they have to be ready to watch it. And that is reflective of a societal shift that I think has perhaps been the biggest reason behind the growth of women's sports. And that's been an acceptance of letting people be who they are authentically.
Yes,
Masculine, feminine, gay, straight,
totally.
victim or not victim, villain, good
Mhm.
guy, like all the things
Yeah,
that we like in men's sports that we allow them to be multifaceted and multidimensional. We weren't doing that in women's sports. We were really either being cheerleaders and infantilizing them and making them your little girl all grown up. She's a great role model, or sexualizing them. That
right,
was it. They were either really hot or they were a good role model. And that was
right,
it. And also usually tried to conform them into some sort of societally acceptable thing. Usually that meant not too competitive, still looked pretty while they competed, all that stuff. And society just letting human beings be themselves in whatever way that looks is massive to helping tone down some of the sexism and homophobia that really affected
true.
women's sports. And like keeping women in their place BS is thankfully being challenged in a way that really allows us to empower women athletes. And then also, I think when you're looking at the people who are watching, it's that it's cool now. And we needed to
Yeah.
stop poisoning the well. It's not just that people would say, I'm not into that. They would actively and with intention try to make it not succeed. When the
Mhm.
WNBA came out, really high profile men's sports writers were writing hit pieces and making fun of it, making it the butt of jokes. That's not just saying I'm not interested. That's deciding you want to try to take a swipe at it and take it out. And
Right.
I think we can't talk about the growth of women's sports without ignoring the context of intention. We've
Mhm.
blamed the product for so long
Mhm.
while ignoring that, say, in England, they had a 70-year ban on women playing professional soccer. So, like, as
What?
these games are selling out, right? What? Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't even know this stuff. As these games are selling out and people are showing up in the hundreds of thousands, they're saying, oh, they're finally onto it. This is great. And no one's like, well, yeah, but they had 70
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
of intentionally preventing people from going to attend and watch and get into this stuff.
Mhm.
We have to acknowledge that. There's
Yes.
head of federations that are still arguing that women shouldn't do certain sports because their uteruses will fall out. That BS pseudoscience that's literally been used so we can't run
Promise?
marathons
Do
and
you do you
right.
promise it's gonna fall out?
Exactly. Right. Like I think when we ignore that context, it allows people to continue on with these disingenuous arguments about it being the product or they're just not as good or it's not the highest level. But we'll watch Little League World Series,
Right.
right? Or
Mhm.
we'll watch college men, even though that's not the highest level. There's
Mhm.
always some, fallacy that they use when in fact so much of it has to be really dug into about how much they wanted to keep women out of the space.
Right. Right. Yep.
And
It's
I love
very
all the
very strategic. Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah, and
Em.
I love all the educational pieces you're doing about it because I went to a basketball camp last year to speak, and the Women's Hall of Fame commissioner was talking about Title IX and
Mm.
asked all the kids, like, do you know what Title IX is? And a lot of the kids had no
No
idea what it was.
idea.
And
Mhm.
it just shocks me. So I love that you're using that education piece to say, hey, this isn't the first time this is happening. It's happened before, or in context of like why records are being broken, who broke them before. So
The
that's great.
history. Yeah.
Yeah.
There,
And
and I was just going to add to what Sarah's saying. There's this whole other element too of the women being able to bear children, right? If we were talking about
Mhm.
uteruses, and our biggest difference from men has always been something that held us back in the sports arena. That, if you even look at Serena Williams, like her playing while she was pregnant was like, oh, should she
Yeah.
be doing that? And women jogging while they're pregnant. I remember like guys that I know, like, I don't think
Aren't you
that's good for
shaking
the
the baby around?
baby.
Yeah.
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 Of course, no problem having sex when you're pregnant, but if you're
Right.
jogging when you're pregnant, that's a problem. But one thing that I saw that just like shouted out, progress to me was at the Olympics, which I think the Olympics right now, it's just such a perfect time for our country that this is happening in so many
Yes.
different ways. But Allison Felix, a track star, launched with Pampers. She partnered with Pampers to launch a nursery for mothers, athletes
Yeah.
that were mothers at the games. Like that's never been. I mean, I think about when I started my career with the Giants, if we had changing stations in the bathrooms.
Mhm.
I go back to 2008 and like what's progressed because they finally
Yeah.
are accepting that you can work and you can be an athlete and you can do these things and be a mom. And
Yeah.
and so that argument is gone. So
And
that's
what's too bad about Allison Felix is that that resulted from her being treated poorly by her sponsors when she got pregnant. And so often it requires this terrible rock bottom
yeah,
moment of how do you still not get it to initiate these groundbreaking moments, like having a
those
nursery at the Olympics, I think for the first time. But yeah, I mean, that's what I love so much about women too, is taking shit and turning it into something.
turn it
Like
in. Yeah.
just being
Yeah.
like, instead of being sad or angry or just frustrated, she wrote an op-ed. She
Yep.
started her own shoe
She sure
line
did.
instead of working with the company that she felt had wronged her. And she found a way to make things easier for the women coming after her. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like, we're gonna be fine. We already are fine. We've been fine, but like, keep trying us. Keep trying
Yeah.
us to
Yeah.
see what happens, which I
I
think
love it.
we're seeing in other spaces right now too, but we'll save that for another podcast.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you are literally everywhere. So we want to go back to how your love of sports began.
Yeah.
Where did it start for you?
Just being an athlete. So my sister and I both were very athletic as kids. I was already 6 feet tall by the time I was in eighth grade.
Oh, she's in
So
the footer
Yeah,
club.
yeah,
she's a footer.
are you guys both?
I'm
Nice.
I'm a
I'm
footer.
footer adjacent.
Yes.
Okay,
I
we'll
Celeste
allow
said
it.
thank you. Celeste
Yes.
said I could be in the club. I'm 5'10".
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take
With
it.
with heels on, I'm in the footer club.
If you were a man, you'd already be saying 6 feet. Because
I just
Exactly.
lie on my bio.
when I was on dating
Exactly.
apps, I would go down just in case that they capped it at 5'10" and put 5'10", and they would go up and they would be 5'10" and say 6 feet, and then we would meet and be like, "Whoops, a daisy."
Oops.
Um,
First lie. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. Get past that one. Um, yeah, so I think a couple things. I was very confident in myself as an athlete, as an academic. I had a big personality. I was always telling jokes. I was not very confident in myself, like with boys and how I looked. And it really helped me to have my body do something for me, to have my height be helpful to me instead of being uncomfortable in my body. And also, I was 6 feet. I've always had big boobs. So like I got mistaken for an older person a lot, which actually was like very uncomfortable for someone who
Mhm.
was kind of a tomboy. I was getting hit on by older men in a creepy way. And it really made me consider my body as my own and not something for other people to look at. And
Mm.
it was very necessary for me to navigate some of that stuff to have this feeling of empowerment like in myself. And I was a massive Michael Jordan fan, obsessed with everything 90s Bulls. I grew up during that time. So like,
Yeah.
how could you not be? And so it was that combination of, playing 3 sports in high school. I got recruited for all of them in college, ended up being a heptathlete in college and watching all these sports. And yet still, it never occurred to anyone that I might want to work in sports. There were so few women that it
Mhm.
literally was never mentioned to me. My parents are like athletic and active, but not watchers of sport. So they weren't like, oh, you should, look into this. So I went to Cornell. I was an English major. I always wanted to do acting and comedy. So I moved to LA to do that and took a TV hosting boot camp weekend class and hosted a fake Chicago Bears show. And the teacher was like, oh, it was just to practice like throwing to break and welcome to my show. And after the break, we're going to, and she was, oh, you want to work in sports? And I said, no, there's no women in sports. They don't get to be funny. It's like Erin Andrews is the only one I know. And she's like a supermodel. So the teacher said, you just seem really comfortable, like maybe give it a shot. So I took a class at UCLA Extension in TV sports reporting. And I was like, this is all
Ding,
the
ding, 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 ding.
yeah, I was an English major and writer. I did Second City Improv Conservatory. So it was that extemporaneous back and forth during interviews. I was comfortable in locker rooms. I had my own experiences as an athlete, and I pivoted, and that was that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, let's chat college and sports since you attended Cornell and you're a heptathlete. I can't even imagine wrapping my head around doing 7 events.
No.
Like how does one decide to do this, first of all? And what is
Well,
training like? I can't even
I mean,
imagine.
first, you don't have to be really good at anything, which is my favorite. You just jack of all trades, master of none. It's like my entire life follows that. It's like I just want to do all the things. I don't necessarily want to do any one of them like so much that I become the best at it. Um,
I just
you know,
want to
it was
dabble. You wanted to
yeah,
dabble.
I love to dabble. I love to know all the things, learn all the things, do all the things, attend all the things. Like I'm in a constant state
Yeah.
of like FOMO of not knowing or doing anything. So I have to do it all. It's exhausting for everyone, particularly my husband. Um, so you know what? It was honestly just natural. And thankfully I had a great track coach in high school. Shout out Steve Clegg, who had done multis himself. And so he's kind of watching me be able to sprint hurdles, do high jump and long jump, shot put and discus. He's thinking, this is someone who'd be a great candidate for pentathlon and heptathlon. So he borrowed a javelin from a local college so that I could enter a local competition to like start trying to put all those events together. I ended up breaking like a 3-state junior Olympic record in the javelin the first time I did it. It came super naturally. And it was just a matter of putting together all these events I was already doing into the specific, in college, you do pentathlon in one day, so you could do it at a regular meet. It's 5 and it's indoors. When you get to heptathlon, it's actually a 2-day event. So you don't do it at every meet. You do some of the events
Mhm.
at every meet, and then specific meets have the full 2 days. So yeah, it's a weird thing. Most people don't even know what the events are, but I
I
loved
don't
it.
think I can name them all. I don't think
No.
I can. I'd have to
High
look it up.
jump, long
Okay.
jump,
Javelin.
hurdles, 800, 200, shot put, javelin.
Good girl.
Yeah.
That was a
So,
test.
yeah, I still remember. Couldn't do probably any of them since my spine is like dust at this point. But yeah, it was really fun. And for like training, a lot of people joke that track is basically everybody else's punishment. Like we're just doing wind sprints, which is what you guys do when you do something wrong in practice. But I got to
Right.
balance it. Some days I'm doing jumping and plyo. Some days I'm doing hurdle. Some days I'm
Mhm.
doing throws. Like it really kept it interesting for me.
How there's so many different ways I want to go, but I'll stay on script. I'll stay on script. How do you feel? I think you were a captain, right, for your
Yeah.
team. How do you feel leadership roles like that have helped you in your career?
We talk about this a ton at ESPNW. We do these campus conversations where we go to schools and talk to all the varsity female athletes. And one of the things we really harp on is how, if you're an athlete and always have been one, when you get popped out into the real world and you're no longer competing, you sometimes don't recognize all the things you got out of sports and how they might apply on a resume or in a job interview because you so take them for granted. You got to work with people you hate. You got to
Yep.
work under coaches that you don't like. You have to manage personality with one common shared goal to get to the end and have success, regardless of whether it's doing it the way you want or the way the rest of the team has decided is the best way. I mean, it's endless. And I think about it sometimes, and it kind of boggles the mind to imagine that there are some people that just try something and then fail and never do it ever again. Meanwhile, in sports, it's a constant, earnest
Every
attempt
day.
at doing your best and then having everyone see that you didn't win, even though you tried your hardest. Like, even that concept for some people would be you would melt under the idea of, I'm going to go out there and show everyone I'm trying my very hardest. And if I fail, they all know I failed. Some people can't even do that. And so we do that repeatedly over and over again in sports. And for me, that mindset is the biggest thing, both the mindset of like putting yourself out there, trying your hardest, and being able to adjust to adversity if you fail or it doesn't work out the way you wanted. And then the leadership part for me, I mean, there's these incredible studies. Ernst and Young has the most well-cited one that 94% of women in the C-suite of Fortune 500 companies played sports, and something like 90% or something played them in college, like some insane number. That ability to see yourself in a certain way that then allows you to assert yourself and feel confident in other spaces like boardrooms and offices. That's the biggest part to me. And then leadership wise, like you got to make it work with everybody. The quiet person, the loud person, the one you hate, the one you love, the one who's great, the one who needs to get better. Like you got to find ways to motivate all of them in their own special way. And the best leaders clearly do that. If you're ever in an office where the person thinks the answer is I'll yell at everyone and I'll get the best out of them, or some other thing, that's to me has been like the biggest part of it, is recognizing how that's affected my ability to work with different people.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
so true.
That's so true. And I love that you go and speak to varsity athletes. That's just huge, especially in that space. And, you know, Amy and I talk a lot about internships are a must for sports and getting into sports. What internships did you have and how did they help you?
Well, since I didn't yet know I wanted to do sports, one of them was very funny. I worked at the Jim Henson Company in LA
Oh,
in PR because I thought maybe I'll do I told my parents acting comedy, and they were like, cool. We just spent like 40 grand a year on Cornell and you're gonna like do an improv. Um, they were very smart though, because I did sports and band and chorus in high school, everything was at the same time. So I really couldn't even do the theater and drama stuff. And they were like, what if you major in that and you hate it? Like, why don't you major in English? Take classes in drama and theater, and then you could figure out, if you really want to do it. And they also said, instead of just acting, maybe advertising, PR, marketing would be creative enough for you, but not as difficult as that career. So I started looking for jobs, ended up at Jim Henson Company. The highlights of that were it was in LA. I lived in a frat for the summer with all dudes. It was so disgusting, but it cost $300 a month, which is like a miracle in LA. And the Jim Henson Studios are in Charlie Chaplin's old set of buildings, right in the middle of Hollywood. It's beautiful. And Paul McCartney and Chris Isaac and all these folks were recording in the studio while I was working. So I'd just be eating lunch and Chris Isaac would be playing his guitar outside, or Paul McCartney would bop, hello, love. I'm like, so,
Oh, I
and
love
then at the
that.
end of the
that's
summer, they had
great.
this epic end of summer party with like an ice luge that looked like Kermit that you were taking shots out of. And like, it was amazing. It made me realize I didn't really want to do PR, but it was still a fun internship. And then the second one was completely random. I got selected other than that, I worked for my parents' company and I coached. So didn't have a lot of time to do other ones. But right after college, I'd been selected to speak at the event the night before graduation at Cornell for all the newly tenured faculty, and kind of intentionally put in my speech, like, still don't have a job, but I know all these teachers have really prepared me for what's next. And one of the trustees in the room came up to me after and said, you said Chicago, right? I have a friend who works for this sports production company. And as an athlete, maybe you could just, intern there and get your foot in the door, which is wild because it ended up being the space that I worked in, but I didn't know it yet. But I got some good prep and I really learned some of the ropes then that helped me later.
It's one of the biggest messages we try and get across on this podcast is to just say yes to things, because you
Mhm.
don't know when you're young and right out of college, you really don't know what you want to do. And you can have this full circle moment, which you
Sure.
did. So I feel that way too, because like I wasn't in sports, I was in hard news. That was what I wanted to do. And then when I got into baseball, I realized I spent my entire childhood at the Little League field watching my
Yeah.
brother. And like I was totally prepared for this. Like, here we go. Yep, I know what's going on. And then just, I got to throw out the Kermit reference because, Paul is my husband. He works for ESPN. I think you guys have met before. Um, but his biggest story so far of training camp is a rookie who
Yes.
picked up the Kermit puppet and made fun of Patrick Mahomes, and like he got busted. And
Not
I feel
smart.
so bad for this kid because he's like, oh, cute, like a Kermit puppet. And it did not go over well with either
Don't
team. So
don't poke the goat,
don't poke the
No.
poke the
goat.
goat.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that poor kid. He's gonna learn real fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit and get on a little more serious topic. We just want to know like what you want to share about it, because I really feel this like somewhat kindred spirit with you that if there's anyone who understands being misunderstood in the media, it would be me, as my career started to boom right when social media became popular. And that was extremely difficult to go through. Now, you had a similar experience early in your career. You post on eBay that you'd be someone stayed to the Super Bowl. And then you said people blew it out of proportion. So, what can
Yeah.
you share about what your intentions were
Right.
and then how you navigated through it being misunderstood and people really just being mean?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it quick. It's basically the long and short of it was the Bears were playing very well. And my little best friend in LA is like a 5'2" blonde. And that's at 6 feet, strong
Yep.
gal.
My
So
best friend's 5 feet. So,
there we go. Yeah. So as a joke for Halloween, I dressed as a Bears cheerleader and she dressed as a football player. So I'm the giant cheerleader and she's the little football player. And I mean, I was 25-ish or whatever. I can't remember, 26 maybe. I made a hot little outfit. I lived in LA. It was Halloween. We all know the vibes. And these websites that I followed were very misogynist, but at the time, pretty much the only option for funny, tongue-in-cheek, young people sports blogs. You were going to get your sports stuff, and then it was going to be Hot Chick of the Week or like Maxim Smoke Show or check out this guy's wife. Like people who weren't around back then do not understand how deeply misogynist pretty much all sports coverage was, but especially the wild, wild west of like the early internet stuff. So I get a flight to Miami. My friends in LA are like Bears fans. I met some Chicago people there. They're like, we're going to come too. And then they all started looking at prices and they realized like, oh, we can't make it anymore. And then I started looking at prices and realized that a Super Bowl ticket isn't like $500. It's like $5,000. I was just a dumb little 20-year-old. I had never tried to go before. So I'm like, I can't afford this. I already bought my flight, like no refunds back then. I have a friend from Cornell I can stay with down there. So I'm trying to get creative. And at the time, Screech from Saved by the Bell was going to
yeah.
lose his house to foreclosures. So he made a website where people could like give
Yes.
him $1 or whatever they wanted to help him save his house. And I was like, no one's going to do that for me. No one knows who I am. How would I even create like search engine optimization so they could find the site? And why would they want me to go to the Super Bowl? So a friend of mine joked about eBay, and I was like, perfect. I'll just use that as a draw for radio stations and websites to use as like a news peg to talk about this crazy girl who really wants to go to the game. So I posted the photo. I said, I'll be your date to the Super Bowl. And I made sure you couldn't actually buy me on eBay. There was no buy by date. There was none of that stuff. It was just basically so that I then messaged a bunch of radio stations and websites and said, look at this crazy girl. She's like, so wants to go see her Chicago Bears that she like put herself on eBay. Went to bed, had 500 something emails the next morning when I woke up. It had gotten shared around the New York Stock Exchange. It had gotten shared on all these different radio stations and sites. And I was like, uh-oh, what did I do? Because for me, I know myself. I know I'm like a jokester and that I really am just a fan of the team. But the way it was received by the world was like, look at this slutty chick who's going to sleep with someone to go to the game. And I was like, oh, that was not my
Well, that's
intention.
not what I said.
Yeah, exactly. So I took a bunch of interviews with, Cold Pizza and Access Hollywood and all these different radio stations and made sure I talked about the game and why I wanted to be there. And Axe Body Spray ended up seeing it. Long story short, I got to take both of my best girlfriends and choose a guy from a contest of hundreds that entered to come with us as our date to prove that guys would do the same thing to see their favorite team. And they paid for the whole trip and the airfare and the tickets. And unfortunately, the Bears lost. But then I kept all the contact info for all the shows I went on and continued to reach out to them as I wanted to start my career to prove to them that this wasn't some dumb floozy thing. And some people still say it is and still intentionally try to spin it as something that it wasn't. But ultimately, the firm that worked with Axe won an award for runner-up event of the year for their ad equivalency of like $3 million for what ended up being about an $18,000 spend. And I got all these
Wow.
connections in my career. So, yeah, some people still try to bring it up. Aren't you the girl that sold yourself on eBay? And I'm like, bitch, let's stop with this.
Yeah.
Like, like that was literally so long ago.
Yeah.
So, like, you have to be intentionally misreading it to see it, for what they tried to spin it as.
It's so frustrating to see that happen continuously in our careers where, and I'm glad that you went into it, I hope that the bitch, let's stop with it, wasn't for me. I just, I think it's so important for people to really hear like what the intention was and
Yeah.
how quickly people misread or misunderstand. I mean, I cannot count, Sarah, how many times somebody's tweeted out something I've done with a player, or,
Oh,
like because I interviewed him in a different spot. Am I having an affair with him? And how difficult that is on your family and my husband. And, you're just trying to do your job. And would this happen if a man interviewed him in that location? Or I hugged Jonathan Sanchez in 2009 after he threw a no hitter as he's coming down the line, hugging every single teammate and
hmm.
every team trainer. We weren't
Yep.
even on air. It didn't matter, but I'm the last person and he leans in for a hug and I'm, like his
Yeah.
mom, and I give him a hug. It blew up. Local radio here talked about it for more than a week about how unprofessional I was. And
Yep.
I'm just thinking, if Mike Krukow, who everyone loves, hugged Jonathan Sanchez, you would celebrate it. Like,
Yep.
it's so that's why I wanted to ask. So I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense, because it's just,
No,
I
it
want people
totally
to
does.
stop doing
You
that. That
have
is
to
just
talk about it too, because I think women coming up will think it's them. They'll blame themselves, or they'll think they're doing something. And what they need to know is that this is invasive and it's been like this forever. And it prevents you from doing your job well, but it also prevents women from, rising in the ranks, because we're held to such different expectations. We can't create relationships the same way.
right.
We can't, find personal connections the same way without people digging into it.
Right.
And I literally cannot tell you a single woman who works in sports from the age of like 20 to 60 who I haven't had someone say, oh, I heard they're sleeping with all the,
Yeah.
literally every single one.
Oh, well,
So
that's how we all got our jobs. That's
of
actually, we should
course,
just stop the
Yeah.
of course.
podcast and tell everyone, how'd you get that job? Oh, I slept with him. That's how I got the job.
Yeah. And
Of
also,
course.
like, I'm really good at sex. I've been in the business for a long time.
I'm
I
pretty
just want
good.
y'all to know, if every single job I've gotten, I had to screw my way there, then I guess what you're saying is I'm real good in bed.
I'm a professional.
Exactly.
Okay, so while we're on the subject of people being mean, you actually won. This is when I really became a fan of yours, and when you got on my radar, you won a Peabody Award. And the reason you won it is so inspiring and brave and deserving, and it revolves around mean tweets. Can you share what you did and how you came up with the idea?
Yeah, I actually didn't come up with it. Brad Burke, who is usually in the like advertising marketing space, but moonlighted as a podcast host for fun on a podcast that was like anything but sports kind of vibes. Like he talked to sports people, but about other things in their lives. He came up with the idea because he kept reading articles and he saw people reacting to the articles very strongly, but then it would kind of die off the next couple of days, right? They would read about how women in sports were being mistreated and how trolls were attacking them. And they'd be like, this is awful. I'm posting this, and then kind of forget about it. He wanted to create something more visceral that would stick with people longer. So he reached out to actually a bunch of women sports reporters, and Julie DeCaro and I were the only ones who took him up on it. I was actually getting married 2 weeks after we recorded, and I had said, I'm not going to do anything outside of work. I just have to focus on like getting ready for the wedding. But I really liked the concept, and he's like promised it would only be an hour. So like, okay, I can do it. Meanwhile, after it gets posted like 2 days later, it blows up. And I have
It blew
literal,
up.
like, I'm on NPR for an hour. I've got radio and TV studios in the lobby of my apartment building filming. We end up going on this, what was amazing, thankfully, a year later, award tour to, the Cleos and the Peabodys and all these other things. We basically just kind of copied the idea of Jimmy Kimmel's mean tweets, where guys came in thinking it was going to be kind of funny. And instead, what they were reading were actual things that Julie and I had received. I hope your boyfriend beats you. I hope your dog gets hit by a car. Julie has spoken publicly about being raped before. And so some of hers were, do you talk about your rape so that people would believe anyone would want to have sex with you? I hope you're Ben Roethlisberger's next victim. Just awful, awful, awful things. And what we wanted was for people to see how much different it feels when you see someone say that to someone face to face instead of over
Right.
the internet, and to realize that your words have power even if you're not speaking them. But what also happened, which was sort of unexpected and very telling, was that we're used to hearing women share about their experiences, and sometimes people tune them out. But in this case, Julie and I were used to these comments, and we were very stoic, and it was the guys who were getting emotional.
They
They
lost
were
it.
having trouble reading it. They were feeling really uncomfortable. Some of them were on the
Uncomfortable.
verge of tears. And fairly or not, when people see men uncomfortable and emotional, something hits different.
Right.
And so it ended up blowing up, like really blowing, like Kim Kardashian and Jared Leto and all these people tweeting about it and millions of views. And it was very powerful. And I'm not going to say things have changed necessarily. It did help Twitter affect some new policies, though. It
Yeah.
was happening around the same time as some other things that Twitter needed to take into account at the time. I'm sure they wouldn't do a thing now, but at the time they were attempting to adjust their policies as a result. And it still gets shared in a lot of classes and a lot of places. So it was really powerful. And I also think I've done some research into it and the psychosomatic effects of in conversation and shared energy versus something on the internet. There's all this research into literally the parts of your brain that are being used when you're typing versus actually talking on a phone where you can hear a voice, or then
Mhm.
even further when you're in person. We naturally want to connect. We read every little tiny movement of an eye or an eyebrow or a mouth. And even when we're arguing, sometimes we're still trying to get people to see our
Mhm.
side, and we're
Mhm.
using their cues to try to appeal to them and bring them closer.
Mhm.
There's none of that on the internet. You have
No.
no idea what the person on the other side is
Yeah.
saying, what their mental state is, where they live, anything
Mm-mm.
about them. And I
Nothing.
actually have had fans that have been Facebook friends or Twitter friends, whatever, for years, who years later, due to some reason, they've asked me for help with something, or they've asked if my husband, who's a realtor, can work with them. And I've found that they are living with like a very ill parent, or they need to clean out their parents' house who just passed, and the parent was a hoarder, and they're going through this awful, like, you have no idea what the other
Mhm.
person, even if they're a person or even if they're who they pretend to be. So we just don't think about that. And it's so important to like engage with people, genuinely
So
and with
true.
care on the internet.
Yeah. Well, a couple of,
My favorite one was if I hope you get hit by a foul ball and die.
Yeah.
And then I wrote back, because this was early with Twitter, your parents must be so proud.
Yeah.
And then I got called into the office and got in trouble.
No, come
Yeah.
on.
Yep.
really?
Yep. You shouldn't respond. I know, that whole thing. I'm like, they just wish
Yeah.
death on me. And
Yeah.
I thought I was pretty like
Yeah. You were light
clever with
about
the
it.
parent
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just
I
it's
try not to
insane.
clap back too much unless it's to make fun of grammar and spelling,
Oh,
or
that's
if
my
it's like
favorite.
one that happens all the time. I try to use them as an example to help people see why what they're saying is wrong or inaccurate.
Yeah.
And then usually, honestly, I'll just write them privately and just say, I feel like you're probably going through a tough time and I hope things get better.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I'm sad for them. I'm not
Yeah.
mad.
That
I'm
they feel
sad.
they
I'm
need
like,
to do
why
that.
are you spending your time doing this? Something must be wrong. And I hope
Yeah.
it gets better, because this is not a normal way to like behave.
So true. Yeah. Asterisk the correct your or
Yeah.
their is my
Yes.
favorite
It's a
response.
go-to.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
the go-to.
Yeah. I literally have hats that say that, like there with the asterisk.
That's so great.
Well, a couple things about your experience though, Sarah. How difficult was it? How healing was it? And what do you think the men really learned from it?
It wasn't super difficult at the time because, like I said, what Julie and I realized was how hardened we were to it. And the only thing that was tough was like watching these guys and being like, yeah, this is messed up. And it's messed up how much I've lost perspective on it because I'm so used to it by now.
Mhm.
Also, I think, sometimes people just say just block and move on. The problem is you do need to sometimes keep an eye on people who are like particularly unhinged just for safety
Yes.
purposes, because they'll
Yes.
find out the address of where you work and they'll tell you, I'm going to show up where you are, and then you need to think about involving the police or keeping track of that. So if you just ignore it, sometimes you're not paying attention to some signs that you might need to.
Mhm.
um the guy's experience, my goodness, I mean, you could see it on the video. And
Yeah.
after, when we talked to them, they really didn't truly understand what it was. One guy said very funnily, I feel like I need to call my mother, which was wild. It was like, well, what is this bringing up for you, like internally, right? About either her experience or your relationship with her. And then the response publicly was just massive, and really eye-opening, it felt like, for a lot of people. And I still sometimes bring it up, or teachers bring it up to just, have a whole new set of eyes on it.
Yeah. So I'm so glad the shirt that you're wearing right now, because I have in my little script to ask you about the shirt you're wearing in your photo shoot. Is it Feet magazine? I don't want to say it wrong.
Fête.
Fête.
Fête,
I
which
knew I was
means
going to say it wrong.
party in French.
Oh, perfect.
I will
That's
not
right along
ever
the
be in a
lines.
feet magazine, sadly.
Feet.
The years of competition, I don't think I'm a prime candidate for feet magazines. So,
There's something happening right now because these two behind me are now going to be 20 and 16, and
wow.
we don't say feet, we say dogs, and the
Oh,
dogs cannot be out. Like it's a
yeah,
whole thing with this
no dogs.
generation. So Fet magazine,
Yeah.
you have pay women on a shirt that, and then of course you're wearing bet on women. How do we get, this is a real loaded question. How do we get to equality in this arena?
Okay, so we topple the patriarchy, reverse thousands of years of existence, and
Sounds
reestablish
good.
patriarchy or some sort of balanced equality. Um, no, it's actually funny. So I'm on the Gatorade Women's Advisory Board, and Abby Wambach was on the board for the
Oh,
first
I
term
love
as
Abby.
well. And we were separated into separate groups to talk about some of the reasons that girls drop out of sports 50% higher rates than boys at a certain age. And it's resources and it's encouragement and it's money and it's all the other things. But it's also expectations for girls and women, role models, coverage, et cetera. But it was hilarious because we both come back to present for our groups. And Abby and I both had the same starting, which was basically like, well, we can start with like the world hates men. I mean, women. The world hates women. So let's start there and then trickle down from there as to why things are the way they are. And we were both like, I think we read the same book. Because of course, Glennon Doyle is Abby's wife and wrote The Amazing
Yes.
Untamed.
It's
Um,
awesome.
but I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the problem. People always say, how can we fix this? And I'm like, we'll start with the fact that all of society is like deeply misogynist. And that trickles down into every single job, every single part of equality, whether that's pay or treatment or opportunity. I do think what we're seeing now is such a sea change in terms of expectation for the athletes themselves and how we're covering and showing them that that's a huge part of getting to equality, which is allowing them to be authentic because that's much more appealing. And I do think that today's society, like if you ask young people their favorite athletes, they don't necessarily stick to gender. They'll say Caitlin Clark and LeBron James and Ronaldo or whatever it is. They'll have this mix because they aren't being presented with the binary quite the same way that we were always growing up. And so little boys are wearing jerseys of women athletes and going to the games. And so I think the coverage makes a huge difference. And I think social media allows for an even playing field. If you choose to
Mm-hmm.
follow places that cover men and women or female athletes or whatever, they're in the feed alongside with all the men, as opposed to what we grew up with, which was some person in charge got to decide what mattered. And it was always men. So what you watched was going to be about men. What you listened to was going to be about men. What you read was going to be about men, from men, by men, with the perspective of men, using the male gaze. Like you are internalizing all of that, whether consciously or subconsciously. And you're even bringing that to your spaces as a woman. Most women have tons of internalized misogyny, and we can't blame ourselves for it. It's literally the messaging with which we were raised our entire life, and now we're having to find it, recognize it, undo it, and then be able to look at things differently. And I praise the women, especially who decades ago, Billie Jean King 50 years ago, was able to look at the landscape, divorce herself from everything she had been taught, and say, no, 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 this is how it's going to look different. And that's why women's tennis has had equal pay for way longer than the other
Mm-hmm.
sports. I think it's worth noting that some people think calls for equal pay are ignorant to capitalism, and that is not the case. No one wants the WNBA players to make the same as the NBA players when the profits are not the same. But
Right.
they do want their percentage of pay
Percentage.
from their collective bargaining agreement to be higher or closer to what the men make as a percentage of their revenue. And with the WNBA making more money now, that's a lot more realistic, right? Their operating costs can still be met while still increasing payers' play. Other examples like soccer, the US Soccer Federation is a nonprofit with the intention to build the game for boys and girls, women and men, and to support their federations, their teams. That unequal pay was not fair. That was not rooted in capitalism or separate professional leagues that are for profit. That was rooted in straight up misogyny and a decision
Right.
on where to put resources. So when we have these conversations, we have to have them intellectually so that people don't try to claim that we're unfairly demanding equality where it shouldn't exist. But when we do that, what we see is almost without fail, when you invest in women's sports like you have men's, when you treat them like a startup like you do men's, where you don't expect ROI immediately, where you put in enough value to expect that over the long term, the value comes back, it works. When you give your boys $5 and your girls $1 and you say, why aren't the women doing as well? It must be the product. that's where we end up at the
Yeah.
same place over and
They
over.
don't have
But
the resources. Yeah.
finally, we're seeing the investment match what it should, and it's blowing up. And that's, that's been the argument all along. So I think continued investment and continued societal change toward just letting women be athletes in whatever, form that looks like.
Well, that
For
was a
every
really
little
good
girl,
answer. That was a really
it
good
was a great
answer.
answer.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
For every little girl out there that says, I want to be just like Sarah Spain, what do you wish people knew about you and your journey?
Well, I would say dream bigger. We need to be bigger dreamers than that. You know, what I would say is that the older I get and the more work I do, either in my podcast where I got to talk to people from every different background and really talk to them about their journeys and what they went through, or in the book I'm writing, which has a lot of, I'm writing the story of someone who had a lot of childhood trauma and overcame it and kind of ended the cycles of trauma to be very successful. So I'm reading a lot about just different kinds of therapy and other kinds of, neuroscience and how the brain works. I am becoming more and more grateful that I was raised by amazing parents, that I don't have those kind of obstacles that some people do. I think I used to take for granted my gratitude, my positivity, my ability to work through problems, my lack of anxiety. Like I thought that I was doing something to achieve all those things, when in actuality, most of it was just really good luck and being very blessed with good mental health. It is a massive privilege to not have those blocks. And so when people say, "Oh, how do you do it on Twitter?" Like, I'm so impressed. I'm like, listen, I'm a cis, white, reasonably attractive, able-bodied, straight. Like I don't have the barriers that so many other people are handed
Right.
before they even get started. So I feel like I should be out on the front lines. I can take it. Like you are not messing with me. I'm so happy and grateful all the time that like you could tell me some part of my body that I didn't yet know I should be insecure about, and I'll be like, great, noted. I was already insecure about a lot of things, but now my shoulders are football players and my nose is crooked. And okay, thanks, good note, and I'll keep it moving. Whereas other people who are really dealing with so many other legitimate issues, they need someone else to lead the way for them. So what I would say is that people who like want to grow up and be like me, if you are equally as privileged to have good mental health and a great family and all the support systems, it's almost on you to lead the way for the people that don't have that, and to be the person in the room who thinks about who else is not in there. Are there LGBTQIA plus people? Are there people of color? Are there people with disabilities? If they're not in the room, what would they be saying right now? And should you say it for them is the biggest thing. And then secondly, if you do struggle with depression or anxiety, or you're not as comfortable in public speaking, or you have these barriers, try to find out who you are and what makes you great and special, and lean into it to find that perspective that no one else has as a result of it, instead of beating yourself up because you see other people that can do things that seem challenging to you. It's easier said than done, but like I love Glennon and Abby and Sisters podcast, We Can Do Hard Things, in part because I'll start listening to an episode. I'll be like, I'm not going to care about this one, or this one's not going to be as interesting. And by the end, I'll feel like I so deeply understand the pathologies of some people that I'm very different than, that I want to be better as a human being in the world. I want to make their perspectives heard more. I want to understand and be more patient with them, instead of being like, who feels like that, or who gets like that, or who has that opinion, which is how I used to kind of move through the world. Like my way or the highway, I'm nailing it. So like everybody follow me. And now I'm much more like, how do I look around and figure out how other people are doing things and why, and then see what we can learn from that. That's a very long answer, but hopefully it's an answer.
It's a good one.
This is our last question we always ask, and it's a little bit in the same vein of what we just asked. But if we take it down to something more specific, and best piece of advice that either you live by, a mantra, and we can even put it towards working in sports for those watching and wanting to kind of do what you do.
Yeah.
Best piece of advice that you follow.
My two biggest pieces that I've always said is, one, this is a small business and a small world. You will come back around to people you used to work with all the time. And if you're someone that they loved working with and they respect and like, they will help you out. You will help them out. You will work together again, and it will be awesome. And if the opposite is true, you are closing doors years in advance that you don't even know you're trying to open later. So work hard, be kind, show up early, stay late. Nothing is too small for you. You're not above anything. You can always help with any job. be more prepared than you ever imagined you could be, because all of that preparation is going to make you calm and ready in whatever circumstance, and also is just going to set you up for success later. It's like all of that cliche stuff is actually 1,000 billion% true. So lead with kindness, lead with positivity, be a hype woman for other people, and they will want to hype you up and help you too. And the other one is kind of what I said, but very specifically, like, find out who you are and what makes you special. When you're growing up, it's so hard to stand out. You just want to fit in. You just want to like figure out how everybody acts and behaves and what makes you cool. And when you get older, the things that make you special and different are actually what makes you shine if you can lean into them confidently. And so, when I moved to LA to do comedy stuff, I remember reading a book and it said, and every year I have to update this example because no one knows who the hell I'm talking about. And then my new example gets dated and my new example gets dated. But the original book said Bobcat Goldthwait. Nobody knows who that is. So then I went to Pee Wee Herman. Nobody knows who that was. So then I went to like
I do.
just basically someone who is extremely quirky and kind of in their own universe, right? And what the book said was this guy Bobcat Goldthwait, if you look him up from the 80s, he had all these movies and he almost like whistled when he talked and like coughed and like sounded like he was having almost like Tourette's when he
Oh, I
talked.
think I know who you are. I know
Yeah.
exactly who you're
And
talking
now he's like
about.
a
Yeah.
major, I think, producer on Jimmy Kimmel and very successful writer and whatever. But he
Yeah.
was starring in movies. And the book said Hollywood wasn't like, we really need a guy who like half whistles and coughs when he talks and yada yada. He didn't try to fit into a space. He made a new space. And so when I went and did that TV hosting boot camp and the teacher said, there's, don't you want to do sports? I said, there's no women. I read that book and I thought, maybe I can make a space for myself where I get to be the funny woman who does improv and interacts with the players and is quick and comedic instead of having to be the beautiful sideline reporter model chick. I stepped into a space that I wanted to see and made it for myself. So that's my best advice. Is like, yes, have goals. Yes, have people that you look up to that you like their style, but you're just going to be a B version of them if you copy them. Instead, figure out how to create a space that's all your own and make it authentically you, and people will respond to that. Oh,
Circle
yeah.
clap.
Circle clap.
Circle clap. No words,
great.
just a circle clap. Yay. Oh my gosh. I am just thrilled that you came on the show and gave us the time. I was already a fan. I'm a bigger fan. And I
Oh,
just
thanks.
really, really appreciate all that you do, all that you stand for, and all of the support you give to women in sports and beyond. You're an amazing
Thank
person.
you.
So
I'm
Sarah
a fan
Spring,
of you too now. Footer and foot adjacent.
footer and foot
Both
adjacent.
welcome.
I'll wear my heels. I'll wear my heels.
We need shirts, Footer Club.
You
Footer
do.
club. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
With the
phrasing might
asterisk
be
hat.
problematic. You just
Yeah.
never know who's gonna approach
Yeah.
you if they think that
True.
they qualify.
All right, Sarah, we know you're so busy, so we're going to let you hop off,
Yeah.
and we thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having me.
Sarah.
Okay. I almost don't have words. Like everything she said, first of all, she's got the biggest and best vocabulary ever. Like she's so articulate with everything she says and just paints this beautiful picture with her words. So intelligence at the off the charts. But I love what she said really about like how small our world is, Celeste. And it reminded me of what Bruce Bochy would always say. And it was this parallel for life for me where he said, you can't win a season in April, but you can lose one. And it's the same in your sports career. Like how you start out of the gate matters later on in your career when you're trying to move up and trying to get those jobs, how you treated people and how you were received and your reputation from the beginning of that season or your career matters. So I'm thrilled that she came on. I got to find another word than thrilled. I got to ask Sarah, what other word should I use?
We're going to be pumped up all day, all week, all month with this episode.
Oh my
Oh, it was
gosh.
great. Sarah
Yeah,
Spain, witty, smart. She is the whole package.
she is the whole package.
All
Yeah.
right, Amy, episode 29 of Girl, How'd You
Okay.
Get That Gig?
All right.
What
Well,
Amazing Woman is next?
I know we're not slowing down. They're all
No,
amazing. I'm so
they
excited.
are.
So we're going to actually tap into ESPN again. It's been our little fountain lately. And it's
Mm-hmm.
Melinda Adams. She's a bureau field producer for ESPN. And our audience is likely going to remember that she recently was completely disrespected during a scrum by NBA player Patrick Beverly, who wouldn't answer her questions because she didn't follow his podcast. Can you imagine if we didn't talk to people who didn't follow our podcast, Celeste?
I know. And we had her back either. Where were all the people in the scrum? You should have had her back. Come on.
We're going to talk about that because that made me very mad. So she's an extremely well-respected producer at ESPN, and she's going to join us.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Please follow us on all social platforms to win our giveaway prizes. We roll them out every 2 weeks. To win, just follow us on Instagram at Girl Gig Podcast and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast.
Yes, and we randomly select the winner from our Instagram followers, and we're going to announce that winner. Get ready for a drum roll, please. September 11th, we'll announce our next winner.
Yeah, and our mission, Amy and Mai's mission right here, right now, is really to highlight badass women in sports. So please help us by spreading the word, getting your friends to follow us at like on all of the social media apps. Really, it's free. It's no big deal. Sign up now. Help us out. For Amy G, I'm Celeste Gehring. Until next time, go get that gig.